Good evening, everybody. It being 7 o'clock, and we are now being live streamed. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee. I have one asked to speak tonight, and that is Councillor Dorothy Maxwell, who would like to talk on performance indicators. When it's time, I'll call you to the microphone, please. So, this is my first time of chairing this meeting, so I hope you will forgive me any little hiccups. Going on with the agenda, agenda item 1, apologies for non-attendance.
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies from Councillors Laura Lawman and Richard Level.
Thank you. Number 2 on the agenda, members' declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations that anybody would like to make? No takers on that. Moving on to, and I will pass on to Ben Smith, Head of Democratic Services, for the next item, which is the background to the new scrutiny arrangements and terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair says, this is the first meeting of this new Corporate Scrutiny Committee. So this report, it sets out the background to the new scrutiny arrangements and attaches at Appendix A the terms of reference for the committee. This follows the decision of full council on 30th of March this year to set up a new scrutiny structure, which is formed of an overarching scrutiny management board together with 3 scrutiny committees. Those committees being the Health Scrutiny Committee, Place and Environment Scrutiny Committee, and this committee, which is the Corporate Scrutiny Committee. Just to highlight the Scrutiny Management Board, because that is slightly different to the other 3 sort of traditional scrutiny committees. So the Scrutiny Management Board, it comprises of the chairs and vice chairs of the 3 scrutiny committees. So it's formed of 6 members, and its job is to drive forward the scrutiny agenda and the function, and it manages the workload of the scrutiny committees. So any requests for agenda items from this committee or from individual councillors goes through to the Scrutiny Management Board. They will look at it, they will look at the work plan, and they will either add it to the work plan, potentially reject it, or they will reprioritise the work plan if there's a particularly pressing item that needs to come. So just to say, in terms of the Scrutiny Management Board and the work plan, so later, probably early August now, the Scrutiny Management Board will hold an informal workshop with corporate leadership team and the executive. Invites for that will go out soon, and that will look at the carry forward items from the work programme which finished in April of this year, and it will look at new areas of priorities arising from, for instance, the corporate plan and presentations from corporate leadership team. So just to say that for this committee, its key areas of business are corporate performance data, council-owned buildings and resources, enabling services such as information technology, outside bodies, customer services and complaints. And you can see the full terms of reference at Appendix A. With that, Chair, that finishes the introduction.
Okay, opening up for any questions from the committee. So we have recommendations on page, sorry,
Sorry, Chairman, I couldn't believe no one was going to ask any questions. So,
Councillor Hakewell.
I think the thing that I always say here is that I think scrutiny at NNC, the resources which go on executive advisory panels, squander the time and the resources that we should have on scrutiny. And I always think I need to say that. I've yet to find anywhere in the country, I know we call it a hybrid system, but more than anything, in the 2 years of this council chairman, scrutiny is crucial. And various times that one has wanted to scrutinise, it hasn't been possible or the resourcing hasn't been there. And this is a political thing. It's not a thing to our officers who obviously have to follow that along. So I really do believe that the Executive Advisory Panel resources and the member and officer time that goes into them should be focused within scrutiny. I just wanted to proper scrutiny, because we know executive advisory panels are not scrutiny. On 4.41, the board, this is Scrutiny Management Board Chair, chairs and vice of the 3 scrutiny committees, see below for details. Where is below? I may have missed it when I read this at home.
Apologies, those brackets should have been deleted. I've written this report for the 3 committees, so that was an error on my part.
So see below for details there aren't.
Sorry, that's my mistake. See below for details is referencing it 4.5, 4.6 and 4.7, the 3 scrutiny committees.
Health, place, environment, corporate, but not... see the 3 scrutinies. It's under what's called Scrutiny Management Board. Can you see what I'm saying, Chairman? The membership of the Scrutiny Management Board strategically drive forward. Board will manage the workload. There's nothing which actually says who the Scrutiny Management Board is. And that's what I was looking for below.
In terms of the membership?
Yes.
I can bring that up for you in a few seconds.
I mean, I'm always conscious, if no other members have questioned it, then it's just me again. Understanding that with the Scrutiny Management Board, and I look at Adele, our legal officer, I can talk about without the content, the call-in. Is that okay? Without talking about the content of the call-in. We did, and a number of colleagues called in a particular item, and the Scrutiny Management Board determined not to allow that item to go forward and to be returned.
Councillor Hakewell, I'm very sorry to have to stop you there. That was then, this is the first meeting, this is the bare bones of the committee. Can we keep to task, please?
Well, I'm, through you, Chair, keeping to task because I want to understand whether the Scrutiny Management Board allows colleagues to attend it. We're talking about a new scrutiny system. It's clearly a heading in here. Can members attend, and are the Scrutiny Management Board meetings minuted so that we can go along and listen to the debate?
I can confirm the Scrutiny Management Board is a public meeting. So other members of the public, so the meetings will be held here in the Cube. They will be webcast, and they're on the website, minuted, agendas, reports, all as every other public committee.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was a legitimate question.
Councillor Roberts.
Chair, welcome to your post. Congratulations. It says here corporate 472, corporate performance data. Are we going to have an input into what that data is? Or is that going to be given, that data going to be given to us to oversee, as it were?
Can I bring in Tom on this one, please?
Of course, Chair. So I will talk in a moment about the corporate performance report. We'll be bringing the performance report, which goes to the executive each month, will come here. Often in conversation in scrutiny, we have picked up other queries for other pieces of information that have arisen in the course of the conversation, and then we report that back to scrutiny members as required.
Because there are going to be times when we might want to focus on certain things and follow them through, as it were, and I wondered if you, as the chair, would allow that to happen, please.
Scrutiny is all about evidence-based reviews. Evidence-based reviews are clearly really important is the data that's given to us. So I would talk with the relevant officer if there's any data that you want brought specifically, then we will discuss that within the scope of any review that we do. And I hope that that is okay with you.
I'm most grateful for your reply.
Chair? Just a couple more points on this particular item. The workshop that invites will be coming out to, is that workshop for all members of Scrutiny to go to, and will we all get an invite? That's number one.
It's for the Scrutiny and Management Board because it's part of their terms of reference.
So we won't, other members won't go to
No,
that?
but the product of that workshop will be reported to a public meeting of the Scrutiny and Management Board.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Workshops, I think, and learning are crucial, and learning together is crucial. But that isn't an option. 12.4, any other councillor may write to the Statutory Scrutiny Officer. So, you know, my first question, who is the Statutory Scrutiny Officer? That is Ben, as there. To request an item appear on the agenda of Scrutiny Committee. I know in the Constitution that any member can put an item on a committee, but what is the time scaling for that to be able to be considered, number one, and how often will the Scrutiny Management Board meet in order that a question can go forward in a timely manner, whether or not it's agreed, Chairman?
So the Scrutiny Management Board meets monthly. So it will regularly review requests from individual councillors or the three committees. So it will review sort of each round of the three committees as it meets. It will review what comes out of it. Yeah.
So just to come back, what's the time scaling on that? When would I, as a councillor who have a particular issue that I'd like to be considered, because I note that it might not be, before the Scrutiny Management Board Committee meets? What's the timing? I mean, I can't put it in the day before a Scrutiny Management Board Committee. So is it 10 days, 5 days, whatever?
Those details are still to be worked out through the protocols that will be developed by the Management Board. So those things aren't quite up and running yet, but when we go into the full rounds of the committees, those things will be in place.
I think I can probably help a little bit with that, Chair. So in terms of that, members can ask you as the Chair to put things onto the agenda, and I think as long as you've had that a good time before the Scrutiny Management Board, it doesn't have to be a specific time on it. For me, you know, it could be, you know, a few days before, as long as you've had really good time. So I think it's about conversations with the Chair around that. Then the Scrutiny Management Board can consider it. I think that sometimes the timings around this, so a month and then you've got 2 months for the other committees, sometimes they might not work out. But I think what's really important is that the Scrutiny Management Board are flexible, they're pragmatic, they don't always have to do it, you know, in a meeting, which is great if we can always review the forward plan and make sure that we've got what we need onto the agenda. But actually that flexibility and pragmatic approach to actually say, a member's asked for this, I think it's a really important issue. What do you think about that? Should we put it onto the next agenda, have that conversation and then move it onto the agenda? So not everything has to be done through a regimented meeting. We can do things outside of that, as long as then we're reporting it through the formal mechanisms of the board. We don't want governance to tie us up into not getting really important things onto the scrutiny agenda.
Sorry, Chairman, just to come back. Therefore, a question to a scrutiny committee held in public does not have to appear on the face of the agenda 5 clear days ahead if it could be put in the day before. It won't appear on agendas if we ask for something.
So would you be asking, so I don't think it would be a formal agenda item. I think the idea is that you would review the forward plan as the board. So you would have that forward plan in front of you. You'd be looking at the next agenda items coming up. And as part of that, you'd be looking at things such as, let's look at the risk register, let's look at performance, let's look at the key items that are on the executive forward plan, and let's determine what's on the next agendas coming through. As part of that discussion, we would also say, chairs, have your members asked for anything in particular to come through? The chair would then say, yes, for example, Councillor Hakel's asked for this to come through. Let's look at the agenda. Yeah, we've got room for that. That would be useful. And then we put it onto the next agenda. So it's those sorts of rounded discussions, looking at all the data we've got available to us to determine then what comes onto the scrutiny agenda, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Thank you, Chairman.
The recommendations for this are on page 6. It's recommended that we note the new scrutiny arrangements, which came into effect in May, and note the new terms of reference for this committee. Are you all happy with that? Thank you. The next item is performance indicators. Before I ask Tom for your report, please can I ask Dorothy Maxwell, Councillor Dorothy Maxwell, to come to the microphone. You have 3 minutes to speak. I will let you know when time's up. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like you to bear with me because although this is a new scrutiny board, this aspect is on page 40 between 5.12 and 5.16. Children and Education Services. When looking at the budget across the Trust for the period 11, you need to look at 5.16. And the reason why you need to look at this is because aspects of education and psychologists and send children in schools, we clearly do not realise the impact that these children and schools rely on extra help needed. I'm not sure that the contractual agreement in 2022-23 really understands the support required by primary education to support SEND children. Each academic year brings in a different type of SEND children, which is not recognised until these children start in September 23-24. The children are assessed and their behaviour needs to be monitored in school before the statement takes place. The head teacher cannot apply for extra funding until this is done. This means that she cannot employ a TA, which costs extra money. This means that children could wait up to a year to get help, or even 2 years. A TA cannot just be employed in the meantime. This child has no support and no education psychologist. We really need to ask the government for more money because this, as it stands at present, is not enough coming forward, and children missing out on their education and their future in schools which they will attend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask? Yes, it was. Sorry, I'd got my watch on.
Oh, very good.
Can I ask Anne-Marie Dodds to respond to you by outside of the meeting on this one, and maybe formulate a plan to do exactly what you've asked for, to lobby government in some way?
Happy to pick that up, I'd say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts. Your microphone, please. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I do beg your pardon. Whilst the councillor was talking, it reminded me that my daughter works at the Buccleuch Academy with children who need special needs. And I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you very much. And can I now come to Tom Barden to bring his report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is a performance report which covers performance statistics and KPIs for all services in the council, which covers the period of April 2023 and was considered by the executive in May. This is a standard report that will come to this committee, and as already previously mentioned, often KPIs are used best as tin openers almost to investigate areas and then follow up with further information or further questions, and that's been the experience when we've discussed performance reports scrutiny committees in the past. This is part of the new performance management framework that's been adopted this year. And the report is focused on monthly key performance indicators. The indicators in this report will change from month to month because when we reach the end of the quarter, we'll be including quarterly indicators that are only updated once every 3 months, and we'll also be including annual indicators when they are updated. And then at the end of each quarter, it will include HR and workforce information in addition to the indicators that are here. There are 58 indicators in the report this month, of which 31 have a target and 27 do not have a target, but are nevertheless important to track in order to give some context for the services. Of the KPIs with a target, about a third are performing on or above target, about a third are performing below target, and the remainder are either within tolerance of target, that's shown by an amber colour, or missing data. Unfortunately, for this edition of the report, there were some changes to the timetable of the information we were expecting from the Children's Trust. Since then, we have now gone back and revised that timetabling to make sure we're getting the information in time. There are some areas of achievement in this report, particular achievements around KPIs relating to timescales of planning application determinations, around revenues and benefits collection rates, which have seen a good start to the year, and around improvement in performance in responding to requests for information across a range of different statutory frameworks. And we also saw the percentage of young people getting the first, second or third preference for school admissions, also at a good rate again this year, more than 95% of children and young people. There are some areas of concern highlighted in this report, particularly around the percentage of highways defects responded to within time frames for the lower priority categories of 3 and 4. Around the number of people who received independent support for them to avoid requiring statutory social care, which was slightly below the target, but at this point in the year there are generally very low numbers, so small changes in numbers can affect that percentage a lot. We've seen the total number of households living in temporary accommodation risen slightly between March and April because of sustained increased demand and limited options for move on. And the number of voids has increased slightly in our housing. That concludes the introduction to this report, Chair. I'm happy to support with any questions, and I have colleagues here who know the business in their specific areas much better than me.
Opening it up. Councillor Pandy.
Hi, thank you for the report. I have a question on this performance indicator. I see fly tipping. Do you include like fly posting? Because I see a lot of illegal advert placed on the railings and other places. So how you deal with those? And second, when these utility companies are working, or if there is any road work, they use signboard and then leave it behind. They don't pick it for many months. So will that classify as a fly tipping? And then coming to your this appendix indicator on that STP 29, it says number of defect outstanding on the network. So is it on your software or when you fix that? Because what is my personal experience, your system or the engineer who are working on the system, they're in hurry to close all the defect, maybe without even proper investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the detail of the indicators, I will pass across to my colleague Graham, who understands these areas.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for those questions. Appreciate them. I hope I can help. So, fly posting, yes, our enforcement team deal with fly posting as they do with fly tipping, litter, and other antisocial environmental offences. So we can deal with those. So in the first instance, it's very helpful if residents or local councillors can inform us where these locations are if we haven't found them ourselves, and then we would investigate further. Fly tipping is an environmental crime, so yes, we can take action where it's appropriate to do so to remove that, the fly posting, and if it's possible, contact the people who put it there in the first place to explain that they've committed an offence. So we can do that, and happy to do so, and if you can provide locations of where you have concerns, and I'll certainly ask our enforcement team to look into it. That's no problem at all. In terms of contractors operating on the highway and leaving signs where they've been doing work, they shouldn't do that, of course. They should remove their signs, but I certainly know that it can happen. I emphasise that I don't believe it's our highways contractor. It may well be contractors related to utility works on the highways and roads. They should remove them. If I'm honest, we wouldn't ordinarily treat that as fly tipping, but we have other powers as a Highways Authority to address that with them. So again, if our inspectors haven't seen it, and we do have inspectors who go out and inspect utility works, both before they go out, during when they go out, and after they're out, we do go and inspect their works, and we're looking for a number of different compliance aspects which they have to comply with within the regulations. So if we haven't seen something, then please let us know, and we will pick it up. And of course, once we know the location, we should be able to link it back to who's been doing work in that area recently, and therefore be able to identify the contractor or the operator behind the work. So please, again, be reassured we look for that, and if we're aware of it, we will certainly follow it up. In terms of the Fix My Street reports around highways defects, they certainly shouldn't be closed unless there's an explanation to explain why they have been closed. So some defects are reported to us, we will inspect them, or the highways contractor will inspect them, and they might conclude that they don't reach our intervention threshold, so therefore it's not a defect under our policy. So in those circumstances, they're required to explain that in the narrative on the Fix My Street system, and then they would close it. Or indeed, if the defect has obviously been repaired, again, they would close it explaining that it's been repaired. But there shouldn't be any reports closed by our contractor unless they've done one of those two things. So again, if there are, please let me know.
Chair, can I ask? This fly posting, you said, I believe, is 5 working days you look into the matter, yeah? I have a report which I reported in April on, I believe, is on the 5th, but it has not been addressed. And there has been, if you want the reference number, I can give you that. It has been over 2 months, and even it has not been done. Maybe they have put more fly posting on that.
Can I come back on you on this? Could I ask you to take this outside of the meeting and let's focus on the performance indicators, please?
And on Fix My Street. So what happens normally if you raise, even if they have planned to repair, they close the defect. They said it has been planned, like maintenance has been planned. So how do I track that if they close the defect? So what happened? Then I will raise another defect at the same location just to know the status. So what is happening is inflating the number of defects. Solution is same. I raise 5 times for the same solution. So council will say that, okay, I address 5 defects, but they are just addressing 1 defect. So how do you plan to take care of that issue here? Thank you.
So Chair, through you. So again, the contractor will look for where defects have been reported a multiple number of times, because of course they could be reported by one resident and another resident might report it. And if they can identify that it's actually referring to the same defect, they will then explain that this is a duplicate defect, and then they'll close it down, so that we try and avoid that happening. But again, if you've got instances where this has happened, then please send them to me, and I'll happily deal with that, as with the fly posting case as well.
Councillor North.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general, obviously we have quite a few KPIs here, and from my point of view, there has to be a reason for some of them. And my concern with some of these, and I know it's still a work in progress from the previous committee, but some of them haven't got a target against them. Now, of course, I used to chair the Performance Committee, so I do recall some of it, that it's very useful to have a target point. Otherwise, why is it on there? And I think, from my point of view, there's a couple on here that got no target information on there, and I know some are under review, there's still no target information at all. Well, okay, you got the data, but that's not helpful if it's not heading in a direction. And we need to know which direction that's heading in. Now, there's some assumptions next to it, but if we can obviously look at these and study them properly from a scrutiny point of view, Chair, from my point of view, we really ought to try and have targets against all of them. And there's quite a few missing. And I think the other thing would be useful, Chair, is some of these targets, I think, are, or some of these KPIs are collected on behalf of the government departments. And again, it would be useful to know which ones we're tracking for our purposes and which ones we're doing on behalf of government departments. As in, it's a legal requirement to have these in place and show that, because there's no markings on here or any indications, in relation to we're doing these on behalf of the Department of Education or what have you. So, but so it's not a plea, Chair, but I would like to see that if we're going to have these KPIs on here, it'd be useful if we could have some targets against them.
Thank you. The new performance management framework, which we've just adopted, allows for the inclusion of KPIs without targets in order to provide some more contextual information about situations which aren't always directly within our control, and also to provide for situations, for example, where actually we should be targeting a range within that particular area. Colleagues may have examples where actually that's been particularly useful in the management of a service, which they would like to add. In terms of the second point around information which is collected for the purposes of statutory returns, then we can absolutely look at which ones of these have been collected for that reason. I would say probably more often than not, quite a few of these will be derived from nationally defined indicators, which is helpful because then that allows us to benchmark them. So yeah, we can add that information in.
Jeff, just on that, thank you very much in relation to both responses. But then obviously, if you could indicate, as you just said, that if possible, in relation to which ones we're collecting on behalf of, which ones are national indicators, then it'll also be useful, Chair, that if there's targets against them, that they're national targets rather than necessary targets that this council set within its corporate plan. So in relation there, we know whether it's a national issue or it's a local issue as well.
Thank you, Councillor. David Watts.
Thank you, Chair. And just to assist Tom maybe with one of those examples. So one example where the polarity, so whether a lower indicator is better or a higher indicator is better, or whether you're monitoring it because it's out of your control, might be along the lines of our deprivation of liberty safeguards referrals. So we don't have a control over that, so we wouldn't have a target around it. But what we would have a target around is how quickly we resolve those. Similarly, for safeguarding referrals, some councils will say low numbers of referrals are a good thing. That means there's less abuse happening or less safeguarding concerns happening in your area. Other councils would say, no, we want the referrals because we want people to be referring in, and there's less likelihood of things being hidden away in that sense. So for me, it's more about understanding the context around that. I think the deprivation of liberty safeguards is a good one because I can't determine how many people might not have capacity at a particular time, and I can't have control over that. So we monitor the trends, and in the background I will also monitor things like who's referring those in to make sure that we're understanding, do they understand the legislation, do they understand those circumstances. So that's just one example. I think probably Children's would have a few of those as well, where you can't necessarily control things, but it might change your practices. So it might say we need to do more early intervention in this space, or we need to do something else somewhere. So you monitor the trend, but you have limited influence over the amounts of referrals that you get.
Thank you, Chair. It's just reminded me of a point which I thought it might be useful to explain, is that the set of indicators that we see here are really the tip of the iceberg in terms of the performance and management information which is monitored within the services. Dave has described there, looking at trends in the people who have capacity or not who within treatment services, and for all of the different services they will be looking at wider information than is just here, that we then might investigate further in order to understand the picture a bit more clearly if there's an issue.
And I can see this being a training area around the KPIs and our understanding of those. Any other? Councillor Hakewill.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. One of the things that always surprises me about this, and it relates to the data and the same as Councillor North, is I don't understand how portfolio holders day to day manage and scrutinise their portfolios if they're using this data. And that's just a statement. I don't understand how that job can be done. We only get it once a month, but without targets, I don't understand that. Anyway, that's a statement. The point about fly posting, could we just know who we report fly posting to? Clearly, it's not going to be to a senior officer, and that might be something that's good to send round to all members. How you report that, because we have the same as Councillor Pandy. The third, and this is a question, and it's around KPIs, is how much do we actually claim back from utilities who fail to make up the channels that are going under? I think that would be a very good KPI to have. Just speaking totally personally, a particular utility provider put broadband in where we live, and every one of the trenches dug across the road give a resounding thump. Why should the taxpayer, through our taxes, be paying for that? So I would quite like to put that forward as a potential KPI. More generally, when you look at those KPIs that colleagues have put, if you look at STP 29, in the narrative it says P3 defects are particularly high owing to customer reports. Well, surely we want the customers to report, and if the customers are reporting, the quality of our roads are failing because they're clearly not reporting an improvement there. And then in the next data of the 30, just below, it says this is owing to the increase in demand, which has been greater than the available resources. So once again, as a council, we are failing to put enough resources into keeping our roads fit. And there's not a councillor here or in the 78 of us who doesn't experience themselves and get that problem with highways. So, Chairman, I know I've asked before that we should scrutinise the highways contract, and I was told, give it a year. Well, we've just about going to give it a year on the 12th of September, aren't we? I really don't know how we scrutinise this and how this data transforms into that. The last thing I would say is, I think I'm right in saying, that we've taken vacancies, which were a much enjoyed debate in these statistics. We've taken vacancies out of this in this new data. Is that right? Because I can't find it. And also sickness statistics, both of which talk about the health of the council and the health of the employees. So there we are. Portfolio is okay. Fly posting we can do. Utilities, staffing and sickness. Okay.
In the main report to the KPIs on 4.5, it tells you why the vacancies have been taken out, because there was the data wasn't quite right. So they've taken vacancies they're re-looking at if you look at 4.5. So the council have identified that the data underpinning vacancy statistics provided in previous reports is not currently accurate. The human resource team are working with service managers and with systems colleagues from across the ERP partnership to review and revise its vacancy data and our approach to managing it. So the report has told us that there is a problem there. They've identified it in 4.5 of the main report, which is page 16, and they're dealing with it. And then they will bring that back. Is that correct, Tom?
That's correct, Chair.
Do we know when that will be brought back?
When it's sorted out, it will be brought back, and we will make sure it will do that.
And that includes sickness statistics?
That does include sickness statistics, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
you, Chairman.
If nobody else has got any questions, I would like to ask questions myself around that area and also 6.3.3 in the report. There are other risks associated with performance indicators. Data quality, for example, is an important consideration. And we know that scrutiny is very much evidence-based. And I cannot reiterate enough how important good quality, robust data and information underpinning that is to this committee. So we've got to have confidence in the data that we've got. So, you know, thank you so much for highlighting that in the report on the vacancies and things. And I'm just reiterating, you know, how important it is to me and the committee.
Chair, I'll just update you on some work that we're doing, because I completely agree. As a performance data and analytics person, then data quality is extremely important as the raw material with which we work. We are in the performance team. We are looking at a data strategy, which will include elements around our corporate approach to ensuring data quality. That involves things like ensuring that people have the right training to be using the systems, ensuring the systems are correct and fit for purpose, and that we have checks involved in and reports which tell us about data quality to make sure that we've recorded all the data that we need and that it's in the right format. We're not using the wrong date format, or we're missing whether the people's genders in the records about them and things like that. So that is 100% a piece of work which is underway, and I agree about how important it is.
Thank you very much. Moving on. Agenda item number 5, draft outturn. Janice?
Yeah, have we done the recommendation?
Oh, sorry. I did say that I would have a little, you know, hiccup now and again. I do apologise. Agenda item 4. Recommendation that the Corporate Scrutiny Committee note the performance of the Council and its services as outlined in the appendix of this report, and use the information provided to aid the process of scrutiny. Everybody in agreement? Thank you. Moving swiftly on. Sorry.
It'll be Mark. It'll be Mark.
It's Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Getting it wrong. Mark.
Thanks very much, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to set out the draft revenue outturn position for 22-23 for the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. The report sets out the material financial issues identified since the 22-23 budget was set in February 2022. The draft outturn was reported to the Executive at their meeting on the 8th of June, and the draft outturn for the General Fund is an overspend of £965,000 against a net budget of over 300 million. In percentage terms, the variance is less than 1/3%. This is a favourable movement of 2.9 million since the last report to the Executive, where an overspend of 3.9 was reported. The detail of the movements against the budget are set out in the report and summarised in the table at paragraph 4.3 of the report. There are a number of movements between P11 and P12. The main pressure relates to the Children's Trust, who are reporting a forecast overspend of 21.4 million in period 12. This is an increase of around 400,000 from period 11. The cost to NNC is just shy of 9.5 million, which is an increase of 176,000 from period 11, where a total overspend of around 21 million was reported. The Housing Revenue Account has a forecast underspend of 701,000 against an approved budget of just over 36 million. The details of the movements against budget for the HRA are set out in section 6 of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Roberts.
The £21.387 million that is an overspend within the Children's Trust is quite a worrying thing. What actions are we taking to do something about that situation? Please.
Anybody like to take that?
I can, if you like. I mean, we're continuously working with the Trust. As you'll obviously appreciate, the governance arrangements are in place with the Trust differ to the arrangements we have for the in-house services are delivered. So we're continuously working with them in terms of looking at how they're delivering their services, but the arrangements we've got prevent us from having that operational oversight that we would have if the service was delivered in-house. But we are working closely with the Trust in terms of receiving the forecasts from them on a monthly basis and trying to do what we can to address and bring the overspend that we've experienced closer to budget.
This is a scrutiny committee, which is a statement of the plain obvious. We presumably, every time we meet, we will be talking about this, or we'll have a report on this, and we'll be kept up to date on what's happening and why it's happening and what the results are. That's useful. Can I just say one thing about £700,000 underspend? I hate underspend. There's jobs to be done.
Councillor Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to point out that I think I'm right in saying that we have two main demand-led services, which is children's social care and adult social care. Both have an agreed budget. Adult social care is broadly within its budget, and as my colleague on the committee has pointed out, the projections for the Children's Trust are not within budget by a very large amount of money. I think that all scrutiny committees, and this is a vital role of scrutiny, need to raise a red flag over this, because this is something that could cascade down the years and could endanger the financial position of Northants. So I think we need to, and also of the security of the children themselves. So there's a double problem there. There's the financial overspend and the question of, if it's run in a certain way, are the children being looked after correctly? So there is a real problem, and every meeting of every scrutiny committee, we have to stress this. But yes, absolutely, our legal powers are very limited. We fully understand what was done to us. But there we are.
Thank you. Councillor McGee.
I'll come in on that before you, Anne-Marie, if that's all right, because I think probably you're going to want to answer this as well. Just to pick up on that, something similar through you, lovely chairperson. That is a huge amount of money, so it's got to have done something. So can we just hear a little bit about what that's done and whether it's made a difference in the trust for children on the ground level, for the staff, for the well-being of the staff, for the well-being of the children? Because perhaps if we hear that, it might provide a little bit of reassurance to know that we are on the right track and that is the right thing to do to invest that money. But it would be great to know that and to have that information. Thank you.
As I understand it, we have the ability to ask the Children's Trust to come to the committee 3 times a year, but some of that has obviously got to be around the financial side and the budgets and things like that. My question would be, do we have any capacity to ask the independent improvement board chair to come along to talk to us about some of the things that they're doing? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor McGee, I'll answer your questions first. So, first of all, what Mark has said is absolutely correct. We have been constantly side by side with the Trust to try to understand it. And as Mark's pointed out, there are limits to how we can become operationally involved, which I know that members have discussed at length previously, with all the challenges that brings. Where the money has been spent, or where the overspend is evident, is in staffing, is in placement costs for children who are looked after, and the other significant cost on there is transport, which again is in line with the corporate position on homeschool transport. So there's some challenges to transport in there. A lot of the staffing issues relate to the reliance on agency staff, which again is in line with the national picture. So don't for 1 minute think that this is excusing it, but it is in line with the national picture. And we are operating, the Trust are operating in a challenging labour market in terms of children's professionals. We are working with the Department for Education and are escalating the challenges that we see at present and challenges that we see on the horizon with the budgetary position for the Children's Trust. So the DFE are engaged, the chief execs of both councils are engaged in this conversation with the Department for Education, and we are looking at any levers that we can pull and anything that we can use under our current contractual arrangement. The contractual arrangement does pose challenges for us because, again, as Mark has said, we cannot exercise the control or the challenge or the granular level of detail and spend that we would do with any of our ordinary children's services or any other council services. So it's not without its challenge. Chair, I note that you have asked about the chair of the social care, the Safeguarding Improvement Board, Social Care Improvement Board. I think it would be legitimate to ask that about their improvement board and whether this money is making a difference. So I'm happy to speak to you offline about writing a letter from you as the chair to ask for that attendance. And it may well be that you also want to ask that question as the chair of the Children's Trust Board as well, who's a different individual. So there are 2 separate there.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Pandy.
Thank you, Chair. I also have the concern on the Children Trust. That amount is quite high, and we need to see how we can control on that. And second thing I'm trying to understand, I see most of the variance, they are like in positive. So what is the good variance when we are planning any budget? Because sometimes I see nearly 10% variance of total expenses. And third one is on this 5.43, last bullet point, is street lighting and asset. And then we go in 5.47. 5.43 street light, we say we are saving 114K. And then on 5.47, first bullet point, that highway and traffic management. So we are saying that we are under pressure, 678K. So how is that different?
Chair, through you, I'm happy to help, but could you help me again, please, Councillor, on some of those references? Because I lost you a bit, I'm afraid. Could you give me, on the street lighting ones, could you give me those references again?
5.43, we go on page 46, street lighting and asset management. That is 114K saving, period 11. And then if we go on page 48, 5.47, highways and traffic management, 678K pressure.
Thank you, Councillor, for that clarification. I can answer that. So the local authority has a number of different lighting assets, a number of different lights out there in the community. Some of them are highways, street lights, and they are managed by Balfour Beatty under a long-term PFI, Public Finance Initiative, with the Highways Authority, and now obviously Northants. It was set up originally with the County Council. So some of the street lights are managed under the Balfour Beatty contract. We also have a number of street lights out there which were managed by the previous districts and boroughs, which are now, of course, also part of Northants. The streetlights, the highway streetlights of Balfour Beatty are managed within the Highways and Waste team, and the other assets, street lighting assets, are managed within the Property and Assets team. So within the report, the first reference you made there is referring to this group of assets here, managed by the Property team, and the second reference you made there are the streetlights managed within the Balfour Beatty team. So that's why there's different outturns on each group of streetlights, because they're managed separately, they have separate budgets, and there's different things influencing the outcome of the expenditure of those budgets. I hope that helps.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair.
Left the variance in the budget. When we are planning, how do we ensure that we are making accurate budget? Somewhere I see like a 10% variance we have underspent. So what's the good, like a variance when we are making a budget?
So I think if I can, Chair, I think in terms of when we're setting the budgets, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, when we are setting and when we are spending, I see if you go on like most of what I see here, like a page 46, growth and regeneration, that is 4, I guess that is underspent, 445K.
So in terms of the process when we're setting the budgets, one of the key bits of intelligence that we use is the in-year monitoring to extrapolate that forward, not just for the following year, but subsequent years. And that forms the basis of the medium-term financial plan. So we'll put in a number of assumptions. Clearly, one of the pressures that we've experienced during 22-23 was the significant inflationary pressures that we've seen around utilities. And one of the key roles that this particular committee will have will be the scrutinisation of those budget proposals. So there was a detailed work that was done for 23-24, as there will be for 24-25, when you'll have the opportunity to delve into any of the detail you may wish to do so around the assumptions that we're making to formulate that budget for 24-25.
Yep, thank you. Chair, through you, what is the good variance in industry, like a standard, when we are making any variance?
In an ideal world, the variance that we would want would be zero, because that way we've utilised the resources in full.
No, I don't mean ideal. What is the industry standard?
I think
acceptable. Like we talk about 5% defect and all those things, the standard. So I don't have much experience in finance. So what's the industry standard when we are designing a budget? Thank you.
There's not an industry average as such in terms of the variations. I mean, I think when I did the introduction of the report, to put it into context, the variation that we had for 22-23 was 965,000 against a budget in excess of 300 million. So the variation is less than a third of a percent. So in terms of overall, if we looked at where other authorities were nationally, we would be closer to coming into budget than most.
Thank you. Councillor McGee. Thank you,
Chair. Simple question, simple person. Street lightings, there's a saving there, right? I'm reading this correctly. My kind of question from that is, why is there a saving when everywhere is dark? Surely if there's money there to be spent, then the lights should be on. I don't know if that's a very simple question, but my understanding would be that actually we shouldn't be trying to save money in those areas, because saving money in those areas and leaving residents in the dark is actually a really huge risk. And obviously I'm like a broken record with that, and we won't say the word levelling up again. So can I just ask about that, please? Through you, Chair, sorry.
I can do that. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you.
So I can reassure you that the saving is not as a result of turning off lights. So the saving will be a result of a number of things which are included in their salaries, other operational running costs and additional income were all netted off to give that saving. So it's not a result of turning off lights. So obviously, a bit like Mark was explaining, from one year to the next, some budgets might vary in terms of being below or above. This saving, if you want to put it that way, is not necessarily a guaranteed ongoing saving. So we wouldn't be in a position where we can invest that saving into, say, installing more lights, because that would put an additional budget pressure on the council, which wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed to be there, because it's not a guaranteed saving, it's just a one-off variance in the budget.
Oh, okay, so that would not be invested into turning more lights on?
No, because there's no guarantee that this saving would recur every year in order to enable us to do that.
So what happens to that pot of money that's been hypothetically saved? Where does it go?
I'll leave Mark to explain how variances are handled, because it depends on various different budgets.
It's up to you, Mark. Essentially, obviously as a local authority, we've obviously got to try and balance the budget overall. So we'll have a number of areas that have overspent, we've got a number of areas that are underspent, and essentially we'll look to see what happens therefore with the bottom line. So it's not that it goes anywhere in particular, it's just part of what happens in in-year movements. So it's the same way as we don't go out and ask people for more money where we're overspending on things. It's the same way that we're underspends. We're just basically trying to make sure that we ensure the financial resilience of the authority going forward, that we can protect some of these services for the longer term. So that's how it all works.
However, Councillor McGee, in our budget setting scrutiny, it is possible to suggest areas of improvement. Councillor North.
Thank you, Chair. Completely different area. And although we're talking about the 22-23 outturn, it's about the year ahead, but it is actually in the report. So 5.87 on page 55, just in relation to the business rates retention, just an explanation on the 4 million, just over £4 million pressure. I can understand and appreciate there's obviously a downturn in the market in relation to business rates, and be some revaluations going on, but it's a considerable amount, and as that's in the report, perhaps just have an update on the explanation on that.
I can provide that if you like, Chair. I think in terms, it's a very complicated system, the business rates, and generally it's accounted for over a 3-year period. So the growth that we have seen in 22-23 amounts to 2.728 million. So that's what we're reflecting in 22-23. However, because of the mechanisms and how it's accounted for, there is then a pressure of 4.363 million the following year. and in 24-25 there is a further adjustment of 252,000. All of that culminates in a reduction in business rates growth of just shy of 1.4 million. But it's because of how it's accounted for. So what we've done in 22-23, the surplus that's been reflected, we've moved to a reserve, so we can bring that back in 23-24 to fund part of the reduction that we've got in growth. And then in 24-25, there is then a surplus of 252,000.
Thank you, Jez. Just a quick follow-up.
So the simplest way of probably putting it is it's a timing variation that amounts to 1.3 million that's spread over a 3-year period.
Thank you, Jeff. A little follow-up, if you don't mind. Just a quick one. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, and you said it was complicated. And on that, just a quick, have the government done their review yet, where they're rebasing everything, which is, my understanding is because of the excellent growth we've had in this county in the past 7 to 10 years, we're going to be penalised heavy on the revaluation, because again, that will cost us heavily in the future.
Through you, Chair. What we are seeing in terms of the rebaselining or the reform business rate scheme, so essentially it's been delayed another year. So we are expecting the same business rate retention scheme in 24-25 with a reset in 25-26. However, the recent workshops that we have attended, again, it looks as though it may get delayed until after the election. So it might be deferred another year. So it might come in 26-27. So again, what we're seeing is the uncertainty around our funding streams, which makes it extremely difficult for us to anticipate what we will have coming in future years in our MTFP.
Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure in that last question there are people who have good contacts with our MPs on how the government treats us. 5.9, talking about the Children's Trust. It is Groundhog Day, Chairman. This is exactly what downed the County Council, and a failure there of the Executive, the Cabinet, to be able to grasp it or find an answer was a crucial part of that. In terms of how it's solved, I guess we might have a new reorganisation. Maybe we should have a mayor or something like that. Because actually, when NCC was investigated and Max Caller came in, the process was to reorganise it and hope it would go away. And of course it didn't. The same integral core systematic problem of children's is still there. And it's to some credit to David and his team that adult social care came in on level. But, you know, there were people here that criticised the County Council and its performance. Be careful what you wish for, colleagues, because this is exactly what's going to down us. Going on to 5.33 on page 44, and this is a broad question, Chair. 5.33, pressure from Corby International Pool of 515,000, 535, running costs community centres, 69k. The council provided support of 621,000 to external leisure providers. The question, the portfolio is here, how the heck did we not realise that the Kettering Leisure Village would be suffering all the same issues and actually scrutinise the 35k we were paying there and understand the sort of crisis we've had in the last 2 months? I mean, all of that data says it must have been happening to everyone, including the Kettering Leisure Village. So it'd be interesting to have an answer from the portfolio holder who's taken time to come here, through you, Chair. 5.43, page 45. When you go through that, car parks, savings due to vacancies, first bullet point, facilities management, savings on salaries, last bullet point, back rent of 2 and savings on salaries, street lighting, including salaries. You can't run this ship, which I might brand as Titanic 2, without a crew. I mean, I really don't understand how the council, I know we've got some data coming on salaries and so on, but it is not sustainable for the goodwill and mental health of our employees or for our budget to constantly, and I can't remember who asked where the budget goes, it was my colleague here. The fact is we're saving on salaries and pumping that into budgets that are going out of control. I really think we could do with some sort of corporate peer review to come in and actually look at how we are doing and benchmarking that against other councils. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to take up any of those questions, please?
Chair, I'm happy to mention...
Were there more comments and questions, Chair?
What was the question?
The question was, did we not see the KLB crisis coming when we... And the other question is, therefore, how long are we going to continue our budgets on holding back vacancies and salary savings? How sustainable is that? And the point about, the Children's Trust is just Groundhog Day.
I think, Chair, if I may, I think the first question to ask, how do we not see KLV coming, is a really difficult one to answer, because any commercial leisure providers...
Thank you. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a number of facets that Councillor Hakewell refers to. He keeps on talking about Groundhog Day with regard to the Children's Trust and Children's Services. The failings 10 years plus ago, when Councillor Hakewell was actually chair of Scrutiny, was down to the lack of management and lack of control of the Children's Services of NCC. And that is very frustrating, because although that sounds exactly the same as today, we don't have control over the actual operating of the Children's Trust. So it's not Groundhog Day at all. It's the fact that if the management was in place and the scrutiny had been in place 10 plus years ago, we probably wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. So I do take exception to this Groundhog Day every time we talk about it. Moving on to KLV, this council had an agreement with KLV to pay £337,000 a year in grant to KLV. But KLV is a completely autonomous, separate, private company. So as a consequence, their profitability and the way they do business is entirely up to them. So it's down to their management and not down to this organisation to try to manage them.
So if I may just come back with a supplementary there. The point that I made was we haven't changed the subsidy that went to them, and we can see all these signs in our report tonight that every other leisure facility was having trouble. The question I was asking was, how did we not see that trouble coming forward? And if we go back to scrutiny on the county, it is exactly the same position. Government decided the trust should go out, but we're still spending the money and the increasing money on children's services. And one day, Councillor Bundy and I will have a conversation about scrutiny, because throughout the 6 years I was on scrutiny, there was never a blemish at any particular point.
Thank you very much. And at that point, we will leave that conversation, I think, exactly where it is.
Thank you, Chair. The situation with KLV is that KLV, the actual leisure providers there, came to us at the last second. And when it was made public that the conference centre was going to close, we knew about it on the same day that the staff knew about it, and the same day that everybody in Kettering knew about it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the report? If not, the recommendation on page, sorry, and I'm slow at this, on page 29 is that we note and comment on the report, which we have done as Appendix A. Is everybody happy to note that, please, as we go on? Thank you. And moving on to our next report, which is capital forecast. Is that right? And is that Claire Edwards? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report before you today sets out the provisional capital outturn position for 22-23 for Northamptonshire and the subsequent proposed carry-forward requests due to the rephasing of schemes expenditure and reprofiles into 23-24. So the draft capital outturn for 21-22 has been updated as shown in paragraph 5.1, table 1. This is to reflect expenditure and accruals in the correct financial periods as we've now gone through the close down period and finalised some numbers in for 21-22. The outturn for 22-23, as shown in paragraph 5.2, table 2, shows a revised capital budget position of 109.3 million, together with a revised slippage of in-year approved programmes as well. The draft outturn that we've had in year is an expenditure of 35.4 million, which represents an underspend of 73.9 million against this revised budget. However, due to the continued reviewing of the capital programme and reprofiling projects into the MTFP across future years, the carry forwards that we're proposing into 23-24 will be 29.8 million as shown in table 2 of the report. Also, as part of this review in paragraph 5.8, we also identify in table 5 items that have also been transferred into the development pool for future consideration of 4.16 million. Appendix A of this report provides an analysis of the outturn position by directorate for the capital programme for General Fund. Details are shown for the projects with budgets over 500,000. The HRA capital outturn report, again, the draft capital position for 21-22 has been updated to reflect any movements in expenditure and accruals in ensuring that things are correctly shown in the financial years in 5.1. The outturn for the HRA capital programme shows a revised budget for 22-23 of 28.3 million, including slippage from 21-22 of 14.3 and approvals in year of 610,000. The outturn for this 22-23 is 9.6 million, which represents an underspend of 18.7 million compared to budget. Again, as part of a continued review of the capital programme and reprofiling budgets into future years of the MTFP, the proposed carry forward into 23-24 is 8.7 million. Again, this is detailed analysis shown by project in Appendix B. The committee is asked to note the report and make any comments as outlined in section 3, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Two questions, really, or one major question, I suppose. It seems inconceivable that the executive could underspend by £73 million on capital projects. And when you look in Appendix A, there's some, I believe it's 8 million, all other individual budgets, projects going down. £8 million on under 500k. Now, those capital projects of under 500k aren't major, massive consultation type projects. They are simple, relatively projects to be carried on. The principle is that those capital projects are there to improve the well-being of the people of Northamptonshire. And to underspend by 73 million really does suggest, Chair, that maybe we should scrutinise more closely how those capital programmes work. And that I put on to you as a question for future scrutiny. But having said that, some people in recent debates, we won't mention, said, well, where does that 73 million come from? And given that we are on video, it might be useful to know that, to explain how we underspend by 73 million, where is that 73 million? Where is it going to come from that we haven't spent? That might be really useful because people are a bit aghast that we fail to deliver that programme and assume that the money's coming from government or somewhere else or borrowing and hasn't been used. So that's my main question. The first was a statement that budgeting cannot be good if we underspend by that much. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Obviously appreciate your comments. Yes, I think obviously what we have been doing and undertaking is exactly that scrutiny. So obviously, as we have said and gone through for 23-24 budget process, we have scrutinised that capital programme and only taking forward 29.8 million of that underspend. We do see and have seen a lot of capital programmes that have come through from legacy authorities, which obviously we now trying to understand the capacity and resources that we have to deliver those. So we have significantly revised the capital programme to ensure that we can deliver a sustainable and achievable capital programme going forward. But again, we will continue to obviously review that, and it will come forward again as part of the ongoing MTFP workshops that you'll be carrying out for 24-25.
The question about how, for a layperson watching us tonight on the YouTube, how is that 73 million funding, if you like?
So the whole capital programme that we will propose to committee will have funding arrangements around it. That will be a combination of grants, capital receipts from previous sales that we've made or disposals, together with various discretionary funds, i.e. borrowing, Section 106 grant funding, etc. If we don't spend it, essentially that money doesn't go away. It is still there. What we're trying to do is put it into future projects and make sure that we actually can deliver a programme that's fit for residents and delivers the programmes that they need in the areas that it should be targeted. So we are looking to recycle those funding arrangements and make sure that we don't lose it and focus on things that need to be spent sooner than others, like, for example, where you have restrictions in Section 106 funding or grant funding that's come. So we have seen a significant shift into funding that's come along as we've gone through the capital programme, which has to be prioritised because we have a certain time frame to spend it in. So things where we're getting the prosperity funds coming in, also ensuring that we've got in top of the schools funding arrangements that we have to spend, and also the transport funding arrangements that need to be spent as well in certain time frames, which we get allocated on a yearly basis.
Thank you, Chairman.
Can I come back on that one? And that is what our job is going to be over the coming years in terms of scrutiny and looking at and suggesting ways that those things can happen. So we need to be on board as well, because our part in this is really important too. Thank you. Are there any more questions? No? Then have we reached the end? Sorry, I can't hear. Yeah, we have finished.
It's just the recommendations.
Oh.
Page 63. Page 63.
Sorry. I'll get to page 63. I'm slow in my old age. Bear with me.
68.
63 it was. Recommendations that the Corporate Scrutiny Committee note and comment on the report attached as Appendix A, which we have done. Are you all happy with that recommendation, that is noted? Thank you very much. And may I just say, at the end of my first chairing of the scrutiny, Thank you very much for your contribution tonight. We have a long road ahead of us, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.